Hi guys, Fernandes Lembo, the National Signing Day edition of On the Grid. Once a year.
Yeah, the first ever.
You're only going to hear me say that once a year.
Yeah.
That's if we're renewed for next year. We're all at various high schools.
Yeah.
I was at Riverview, just got back from Booker. Why don't you tell our viewers where you were at and how many athletes were out there?
I was at Braden River. There were 9 guys who signed, all to play football. I went to Palmetto next. There were a dozen, but we had some football players, also a soccer and a baseball player, and 3 softball players. So, National Signing Day, obviously football gets most of the pub, but it's not just a day for football players. If you're a D1 athlete in other sports, you can do that as well.
I was at Riverview, and like I said, Booker, out of all the athletes, 9 or 10, only one, Jordan Evans, a soccer player from Riverview, was going to Furman University, Division I.
Right.
Not a lot of Division I athletes this year. A lot of athletes, not a lot of Division I. Is that the trend around here the last couple of years? I remember, and maybe so do you, years ago, a lot of Division I athletes came out of this area.
I think it goes in cycles. I remember there was one year, a few years ago, where there was only one Division I athlete, and he played football at Braden and Prep. Remember Braden and Prep?
Sure.
So, it goes in cycles. Obviously, some years have more than others. But, Dave Marino, the head coach for Palmetto, said it best today, and that's quoted in my story. All these guys are going to get, free of that burden of college loans after they graduate.
Sure.
They're going to graduate, get a job, and not worry about college loans. So, maybe we don't have too many of the big splashy Division I signings, but a lot of these kids are getting money to go to college. And not to sound too Pollyanna-ish, but that's kind of the important thing right now.
That is reason. Name a couple of names that our viewers might be familiar with who did sign today.
Well, we weren't there, but Jared Hewitt, defensive lineman for Venice, our defensive player of the year, is going to Virginia Tech. Over at Manatee, Cavius Price, wide receiver, picked Kent State. It was between Kent State and USF.
Right.
He picked Kent State. Over 2 guys going to Savannah State, Palmetto, Octavius James.
Right.
Manatee, Trayvon Rumpf. So that's pretty cool. And also Elijah Mack from USF, going to USF from Charlotte.
Big move.
Big move. So yeah. There are some pretty cool signings. Pretty cool guys. And also, of course, obviously Jacob Huseman going to Appalachian State. Ryan News, the tight end, Braden River. FIU, JoJo Lewis. And Alex Ligero, the offensive lineman for Braden River, going to Marshall. So they had 4 D1 guys signed. Not bad, seeing as how they won, one game 4 years ago. Yeah,
very good. Yeah. Again, I was at Booker, 4 athletes, 3 of them from the Booker baseball team. Right. Jeremy Schmidt's done a nice job there.
Yeah.
Sarah Jenkins is going on a softball scholarship. But when you think of baseball programs around the area, you don't necessarily think of Booker High, but I guess Jeremy's doing a nice job out there, at least developing pitching, because that's sort of his background.
And part of it, too, is also maybe he's reaching out to the right people and getting his kids, some exposure. That's a big part of it as well. I mean, obviously the kid has to do his or her part and do the right things in the classroom and on the field and kind of market themselves. But if you have a coach who kind of puts out some feelers, that helps too.
At Riverview, just throwing out some names, Arian Green going to College of San Mateo out by San Francisco. You got a transfer, Jordan Moranke going to Coffeyville Community College out in the Midwest. O'Shea Grant going to Alabama State. And you got Brock Eblin going to North Carolina Wesleyan College. I never had a signing day, but I mean, you saw the kids' faces. Great excitement.
Yeah, and the parents, too. That's always kind of cool. When the parents get up there, there were some tears being shed. And also, one name I should mention at Palmetto, Ben Espinal going to play soccer at USF. Didn't play a whole lot of games this year with the Tigers. He played club for the Clearwater Chargers. But he's going to USF, and USF has made the NCAA tournament in boys soccer 8 of the last 9 years. So, I don't think, their boys soccer team, men's soccer team, I should say, at college, gets quite the credit it deserves. But that's a pretty good move for him to go to that program. And Palmetto didn't have a big year this year, but they've always been one of the better soccer teams in the area. So it's not surprising that they're sending the guy to USF.
You know what a lot of people don't think? They think of National Signing Day. They think that everybody signs on today. In the coming days and in the coming weeks, we're going to get a lot of local athletes who finally make their decision after National Signing Day.
And like I said, too, a lot of it's a domino effect. Maybe a school doesn't get a guy they thought they'd get, and they reach out to somebody else, or So yeah, I mean, today is just the first day, but it's the day everyone kind of points to.
I wrote a story last week about the recruiting, how people change their mind. Your guy, Jacob Huseman, sort of changed his mind from FIU to Appalachian State. That happens nowadays, right? It's happening a lot.
Yeah, it does, and that's why, for me, I'm not a huge fan of these verbal commitment stories. I mean, we have to write them, but because really, it doesn't mean anything. And I would never criticize a kid for changing his mind or her mind. You got to do what's best for you, and some big decisions for the next 4 or 5 years of your life. And we've seen college coaches, recruit kids and then leave for another job. But the verbal commitments, they're also, in a sense, flimsy you know, because it's not official until you sign that line that binds you to that school. And, you know, so yeah, I mean, kids have the right to change their mind. Obviously, maybe the closer you get to signing day, like if a kid commits last week, there's a good chance that's going to stick. But, you know, a lot of these kids, it's funny, you see kids sometimes commit when they're juniors, and then you see kids do what Kavius Price did and commit today or last night. So, you know, each kid has their own way of doing it, and it's pretty interesting to see how it's done.
A guy like Jacob, he was seemingly going to FIU, and he told me from my story that a lot of it is timing.
Right.
That he was set on FIU, Appalachian State approached Kurt Bradley. Kurt Bradley relayed the information. He did his research, and he realized, wow, this program, more tradition-filled than FIU in a college town. So they came later, so I'll go with them. A lot of it is timing.
It is, and you know, like I said, and it's the kid having to realize that you have until that day. Now, I've talked to some high school coaches who tell their kids, look, you commit verbally, that's what you stick to, because that's your word. You know, I've heard that before too. But like I said, at the end of the day, it's a big decision. It's 4 or 5 years of this kid's life. It's going to set you up for the rest of your life, education-wise. So, you know, to me, take that time, make your decision, and then today's the day you really make the decision.
I've talked to a lot of, you mentioned sticking to your commitment. A lot of the old school players feel that way. Talk to David Boss, talk to Todd Johnson.
Right.
They said once you made your verbal commitment, you stayed with it.
Yeah.
I guess times have changed. It's always trying to get to that next level.
Yeah,
now,
and I
isn't
guess too, it's always, like I said, it's different for each kid.
Yeah.
You know, it's different for each kid and each family, and you know, it's a process I never had to go through. I was never a college or high school athlete, so I never had to go through what these kids are going through. So, you know, I don't think it's as easy as it looks sometimes. And again, every kid has their own story, and at the end of the day, it's best for what's best for you and your family.
Big thing was me was getting my dad to pay for my college education.
Right.
That's what I was on the fence about. Should I sign a letter of intent with my dad or go with somebody else's dad?
Yeah.
So,
my dad told me 4 years on him. The rest I got to pay for my own. So I made sure I was out in 4 years.
You don't have one of those 3-hour fifth semesters where you're not going to any class.
That wouldn't have flown.
There's other stuff going on.
Yeah.
We'll both be at games tonight. But let's talk about a game you were at.
Yeah.
Mooney put him into the regional title game Friday night at Tampa Catholic. 1-0. Alex Turner.
They beat LaBelle.
Yeah, I saw him 5 goals. You saw him score the only goal.
Right.
This guy is clearly one of the best players, not only in the county, but maybe in the country. Can you say that?
Well, yeah. Well, it's hard to say that.
Right.
Who knows what else is out there? But yeah, he was, like you said in the story, he was waiting for his break. Great pass from Max Yule, kind of split some defenders, and he got his break, and he scored a big goal. About 10 minutes left.
Right.
Earlier, he had a nice header that looked like it was going in, but the goalie for LaBelle made a nice save. And yeah, Mooney, first time since the 03 team finished second in Class 1A. They're going to a regional title, and the girls' team went to the regional final too. So a good year for Mooney soccer.
Good year for Mooney soccer. What else we got coming up on the docket?
Well,
maybe they should
one thing we
about?
should mention quick. Last week, Palmetto beating Lakewood Ranch in the girls' 7A11 district basketball final. Ranch, the #2 team in 7A. They'd beaten Palmetto twice by a combined 31 points in the regular season. Palmetto was down 12-0, came back and won. Tina Stevens had a great night for the Tigers, and on Thursday night, they'll be home, and Lakewood Ranch has to travel. So not what we thought would happen, but that's the fun of the district playoffs.
Yeah, it is a good time.
Yeah.
And maybe I should just give a shout out that we have our show, which is doing well.
Yes.
But I'll be rejoining Tom Tryon for WTF tomorrow. Right. And maybe we could touch on it briefly with a little time left. We're going to be talking about this new bill that may be going through the House that may make it the wild, wild west on athletes. No time period. You can do any time. You don't have to say you're going for academic reasons.
Right.
What's your take on that?
Well, I'm curious to know a little bit more about it. I'm curious, like, you know, can you play football at one school, then turn around and play basketball at the next school, and then play baseball somewhere else? I'm curious what this is going to entail. But yeah, if that happens, it's going to be, if we think it's crazy now with these kids switching schools, if this bill passes, who knows? I
was talking to a lot of coaches, and while some people think superpowers might be created, they think it might go the other direction. You only need one quarterback. If a team has 3 quarterbacks, one guy may think, well, I'm going to go to another school just so I can play. So it may balance itself out in the long run.
We'll see. It's going to be strange if it happens.
If it happens, and it's going through the House and Senate, and if it's passed, it'll take into effect in July. So we'll look forward to that. John? The signing edition is over.
Also, too, go to HD Preps. We got videos, pictures, stories from signing day. Go to Tout, go to Twitter. We got it covered.
You can virtually OD on signing day.
Yeah, you can get really just over. Never want to see a signing day picture ever again if you go to our website.
And I promise we won't talk about this next week.
We may. Who knows?
We got a whole bunch of stuff to talk about next week. So for John Lembo, I'm Doug Fernandes, and we'll see you next week on The Grid.